His name is Robert Poseel, but we're going to call him Bob because we're all friends around here. Bob, you are a man who's a successful entrepreneur. You're a car enthusiast. You love Great Danes, I believe. You got a lot of great interests. One thing you did not expect to do or be is an author. So you want to introduce yourself quickly and we'll get into that?
Yes, I'm Bob Poseel. I am actually in the landscape construction. That's basically what I do for work. And I got involved in doing this book, which is a love story based on the information that I retrieved from Ruthie, and the story is absolutely unbelievable. So I hope everybody is ready for the ride. It's a roller coaster ride, and love is always the answer. And you can grab the book at loveisalwaystheanswerbook.com, all one word. And that leads you to my website, and there's a link there you can click on and purchase the book.
Thanks, Bob. Now, every love story doesn't have quite the rocky road that yours did. Let's talk about how you first met Jen, and you didn't expect to have a relationship. You just expected someone to help you with your dogs, correct?
Yes, I basically I belong to a few Great Dane sites, and obviously I have a Great Dane, and I was reaching out because Samson was a puppy at the time, and he was very, very, very bouncy and kind of out of control. So I got involved in talking to some people, and some people gave me Jen's name. Now, Jen is in California, which is 3,000 miles away from where I am. So I'm thinking, oh boy. So anyway, I got a hold of her, messaged her, and she messaged me back. She gave me her phone number. I called her. We set up basically a time for her to come and at a cost to train my dog Samson. And that's basically how it all started. It was just a business relationship when we first started. As she came, I picked her up in Logan Airport and brought her back to the house. And we started talking, and she was kind of giving me some pointers of how we're going to train my dog. Now, obviously, it's a Friday night, and Saturday morning came around, and we went out for breakfast, and we started talking. And she said, boy, I love this area. It's beautiful. It's quiet. It's peaceful. And I said, look, if you're that good at training dogs, and obviously you rode horses and you're big into the horse industry as well, I said, would you ever think about moving into this area? And at that point, she said, boy, I would give it a thought. And Saturday afternoon, and this is going to blow a lot of people's minds, as I'm there and we're having this conversation, it's Saturday afternoon, I go on the website and I found a house that was like a mile and a half from where I lived. And then all of a sudden, it just kind of blew up. We went to look at the house on a Sunday, and I put an offer and I purchased the house. It was just like, it was instantaneously, and I can't explain, it was just unbelievable. The chemistry, and there was something about her that really drew me into her. That's kind of how that all started, and the rest is history.
So you met someone to train your dog who was excellent with the dog, but also left an impression on you. She moved out there, and you somehow got Ruthie's phone number, and talk about how you reached out to her. Your first call with Ruthie wasn't really, and I know Ruthie because she's helped a ton of people. It was a little more pessimistic and negative than you expected, correct?
Right. There was a friend of mine. She went to one of Ruthie's conferences, and she gave me the number, and she couldn't talk enough about Ruthie. And then Jen left and went back to California. And I had this gut feeling like something just wasn't right. So I said, heck, I'll give it a shot. So I got a hold of Ruthie. We set up a date. I think it was August 24th, 2017. And I started talking to Ruthie and asking her questions about this Jen, who was, obviously now we purchased a house and I'm involved in this relationship. And some of the things that she told me, I was like ENR and saying that, there's no way. There's just no way this is going to happen. And some of the things I don't want to give too much away for the book. But one of the things that she says, well, I see drugs in Jen's life. I said, oh, yeah, she's an antidepressant. She's got depression issues. She goes, Bob, no, I'm not talking about that, she says. She says, I see some other drugs in her in her life. And I go, oh, I just kind of put it to the side. And then she goes, oh, I see she has a short life between 2 and 3 years. And at that point, that was it, Bob. I was like, oh, I'm going to hang up on this woman. This is it. I can't deal with this anymore. Right. So I was nice. And she sent me the audio of our first conversation. And I just left it as where it was. That was it. That was in August 24th, 2017. So that was my first conversation with Ruthie at that time.
Yeah, and Ruthie, we've had this conversation before. Again, you were in the documentary Afraid of Nothing. You've been on a couple episodes as well in the podcast. You're very busy. You're super busy. You do hundreds, I don't know, maybe thousands of readings. They're in and out of your mind. You can't keep it all in, but you remembered this one with Bob. So you want to tell us why? And did it kind of even surprise you, the negative feelings that you were getting on this virtual or psychic meeting with Bob?
That's correct, Bob. Yes, and my readings aren't typically negative like that, but I tell the truth. Whatever I'm getting it because the person I'm talking to is supposed to hear it. And I did not get any good feelings about Jen. And I knew that this was putting Bob off, but I knew that he was walking into a hell, basically. And I was trying to persuade him that she wasn't who he thought she was. So that's exactly how it worked. And I felt bad that I was telling him this information, but at the same time, I have to always tell the truth.
So, Bob, you took the information like, oh, God, this is awful. And you went away, and then you started realizing some of the things that Ruthie told you were right, and you kind of had a reunion call with Ruthie. You want to talk about that?
Yes, it was in February of 2018. And at the time, Jen and I moved into the property in November. We were in the property for 6 to 8 weeks. And all of a sudden, the issue was that I gave Jen a phone. And at that time, she was using the company phone that I got her. And there were all these calls from like Boston and Worcester, and I didn't understand it. And at that point, at that moment, on January 18th, 2018, I discovered she has a problem, and it's a drug problem. So at that point, she realized that I found out about her issue. And at that point, I moved into my other property that I had, and she was taking over this property. In February, I called Ruthie, and I said, Ruthie, am I going to get my house back? And Ruthie is going, oh, Bob, you should have listened to me, right?
So, Ruthie, it's been about a year since you've heard from Bob, who didn't have the happiest reading, and you hear from him again. Did you remember who he was, and what was your thought?
I remembered who he was immediately because of the bad news I had given him. And a reading like that doesn't happen. It's so rare. It's not even funny how rare it is. So I immediately knew who he was, and I knew he was calling me back for the very reason that he was, which was to say, how bad is this? And I told him it's going to be very bad. We finished the conversation with basically he was going to have to pay money to get her out of the house. And this story goes on, but the bottom line was I had her number. Of course, I thought I had her number, but I only had part of her number, which you'll hear more about later on.
Yeah, I mean, the audience is probably listening going, wait a minute, I thought this was a love story. This poor guy is being put to the ringer, but no, audience, stay with us for this. And also, we're not going to tell you everything. We're going to ask you to get the book, and we'll share that again at the end. But one of the things Ruthie mentioned was that Jen was not going to live very long, Bob, and that came to pass, too, after you talked to Ruthie, I believe. That's when your relationship also took another change.
Well, in February was the time that I spoke to her in 2018, and she said, I see a 6. So you're going to get your house back in June. And I got my house back June 26, and it cost me 10 grand. So I finally